Hi, everybody. Welcome and thank you for joining us on today's video here recording. We are recording today with Ant Lyons, the co-founder of YPN, Your Property Network magazine. Hi, Ant. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Very good. Bit rusty. Haven't done one of these in a while.
It's been a while, but it's good to be back on camera. And we thought we would come back, and we've had lots of requests from people who want to know a bit more about the realities of property. And, rather than just, we all hear about the high level things that can, income that we can make in a short period of time. And absolutely that can happen. And also we're here to just deliver the reality of the situation as well. And in this case, we're going to be talking about the 6 biggest mistakes that could be made in property investing. So these are from personal experience, right, Ant?
Some of them from personal experience, without a doubt, and some of them are. So I've been a landlord for over 15 years, and I've been a developer as well. And obviously, running the magazine and working with you, we know loads of people in the property industry, and these are some of the things that we see people get wrong. So it was really difficult to get this list concise. So I've got 7 plus 1 mistakes. Okay, so if that's okay, shall I just jump in?
Well, how are we ordering these? Are these just random, or are we starting at a particular point? The biggest mistake?
No, I think they can all be huge. So,
Okay.
So let's just say we're just going to say these are 7, maybe plus 1 of the biggest or most common mistakes we see people make when they just starting out in property.
Okay.
It's by no means a comprehensive list. There's loads more mistakes that you can make. So and have made. So
It's a good starting point.
a good starting point. So number 1, okay. And this is buying something somewhere that you don't know. And I'm going to give you an absolute classic example of this. So I was running a small workshop years ago where I started off using an example saying, maybe don't start with buying an off-plan investment overseas in a country where you don't speak the language and you don't understand the tax laws and the legislation and all those kind of things. And I used an example, a real life example, that I was driving down the coast on the south coast of Spain about 15 years ago, and the mayor of Marbella had just been arrested at that point for selling off plots of land that they didn't own and that people built their dream holiday homes on and ended up losing. Now that absolutely happened. It's an extreme example, possibly, but I used this example in this workshop I was teaching. And at the end of the day, the guy came up to me and he sat there all day and he said, I've been offered this great off-plan opportunity in, I don't know where it was Bulgaria or somewhere that seemed really popular at the time. What do you think? And I said, well, I don't know anything about it, and nor do you. So at a less extreme example, and you've probably heard this 100 times, 1,000 times, we see people living in quite expensive areas, maybe in the southeast, and they say, I'm going to buy up north. I'm going to go up north and buy. Now, up north is quite big. And you don't know anything about your tenant profile. You don't really know what the property values are. You don't know the letting agents. You don't know anything about it. Who lives there, really? You're just attracted to, might seem cheap, for instance. So I'm not a believer that everything needs to be on your doorstep. A lot of my properties are 120 miles from where I live. I try to never go back to them. I'm not a hands-on landlord. But it's in a city that many years ago, I was a student. I kind of have connections with still. I know other people that invest there. So I knew a bit about the place. I could find a little bit about it. So number 1 mistake, don't buy something where you know literally nothing about the area. Would you agree with that one? Do you see that happen sometimes?
Yeah, I think you've touched on it a little bit there, because you said, well, these are some areas that you don't know anymore, but you used to know at some point, or perhaps some people might want to invest in an area that they don't know, but actually if they were to do the research on the area, then they would get to know it. So I think what you're saying is don't buy blind, as in you've never seen, you just buy something in auction that, is a random property. If you want to invest outside of area, which you're saying is, it's possible you can do, of course, investing remotely, but actually do your research. So I think that's an important distinction to make, is that, you know, the solution to this mistake or this problem really is to do your due diligence, researching, getting to know, as you say, who's going to be living there, what type of tenant profile, what's going on in the area, what's happening, what is the local businesses, is it thriving, is it a growing sort of suburb that's located near a big city, and for a lot of cities up north, and I'm from up north, you know, you really do have to know the street. You know, it's not just about even the city or the area, and in some places you have to know which side of the street. I've walked along the streets and one side is completely boarded up and the other side is fine, and you wouldn't believe that, you know, in this day and age you could literally go in and buy the whole street if you wanted. So it's so important to know, to have been there, walked around, and get a feel for it, that's for sure. So yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So the second mistake that I see people make is they buy a property that they love, that they can envisage themselves living in, and that potentially makes no financial sense whatsoever. So another example, as I was at a property show years ago, and I was talking to someone about what they did, and I think she worked in the public sector, not a hugely well-paid job, and she wanted to get out of it. And she had either 2 or 3 buy-to-lets at the time. And she told me, she was chatting about the numbers, and she was subsidizing those properties by whatever it was, X £100 a month. The rents weren't really covering all the costs. It was an expensive area. She lived in London, is what she knew, and she was, I guess, buying something that she knew. But at the time she said, "Oh, I'm just about to buy another one of these." And I was like, right, okay, well, this is actually taking you further away from your financial goal of, you know, reducing your number of hours, or, you know, maybe quitting the day job altogether and becoming sort of financially free. But she couldn't see it, because she could envisage herself living in these properties. And that was what was stuck in her head. And I think that happens a lot. Again, I'll use the overseas example. A lot of people come into this and go, "Oh, wouldn't it be lovely to have a villa in, you know, Portugal, Spain, Greece, wherever it might be?" I'm sure it would be. But actually, as a financial investment, it makes very little sense whatsoever. But they kind of fall in love with it and forget they're never going to live in it. And if they're like me, hopefully never going to go back to the property.
Yeah, they're losing sight of their goals, and they're actually, as you say, they're just falling in love with the idea of it. And they're mixing 2 very different goals, you know, the goal of being able to, you know, imagine themselves there, or go on holiday and have that villa abroad. They're mixing that with the investment strategy. You really do need to look at the spreadsheet when you're looking at, is this a good investment or not? There's plenty of other things to consider, but does it make sense on paper? If it does, well, by all means, fall in love with it later on.
Yeah, and you might fall in love with it because it puts money into your bank account each month. You know, that's
the best reason.
That's always the best reason to fall in love, I'm sure. So I didn't mean that. I definitely didn't mean that. So, okay, so the mistake number 3 is kind of the opposite to this, actually, and that is buying something that, because it's cheap. Okay, so again, when I've talked to investors, they'll say, "But I can buy in, you know, this certain area of the valleys in Wales, or I can buy on these streets in Liverpool, or, you know, wherever, lots of places around the country, for £20,000 or less." You know, and some people watching this may not believe that's true. It genuinely
just go on to Rightmove. They're there. They're still there.
They are there, and they are there for a reason.
Yeah.
So this is a little bit like mistake number 1. It's something you just don't know. So in an area you just don't know. So there are places where nobody wants to live. You know, it doesn't matter how cheap it is to rent. Those towns are, or those areas are dying. They've got massive amount of social problems. The day you buy it and it's not secured is possibly the day that someone goes in and copper strips it, and you know, you're piling a whole load more money into it. So there are investors that operate very, very well in these areas, but is that you? I've always thought I want to feel safe when I go to my properties. I want my tenants to feel safe and warm, and those places don't have to be somewhere that I would aspire to live in, but I would be happy to if it came to it, if I had to live there. So I think that's quite easy. I remember meeting a guy years ago, and he was lovely and really kind of upper middle class, and he spoken to a property trainer who said, this is the area in Bristol that you should buy because it's really cheap. And he told him the area, and I knew it a little bit more by reputation than spending any time there. And I thought, this guy's going to get eaten alive if he walks the streets in there. There's no way this is going to work for him. So I would urge, yield on paper is a very, very different thing to the real returns that you might get and the amount of hassle that you're going to get from a property like that.
Yeah, I think it's sort of the flip side of what we just said about falling in love with the property, is that it's, you can't just look at the spreadsheet. You have to look at both. You have to look at the spreadsheet and you have to look at the bigger picture as well. You certainly don't want to be buying a problem. For most investors, you want to be buying an opportunity, and that the opportunity is to either have the long-term capital growth or just the reliable income from good tenants, because there's good demand in the area from the type of tenants that you want to be living in your property. So yeah, completely agree. Just to make sure that you
I mean, a lot of this, it sounds real common sense, doesn't it? And it is common sense, but common sense is quite often fairly rare. So I think sometimes when people come in, it's very easy to lose sight of these things because you're attracted to yield, or you want to buy something that you aspire to, or whatever. For whatever reasons, this common sense stuff goes out the window. So it's just a reminder. So okay, so mistake number 4 is not crunching the numbers. So, and this can be anything and everything really, from they don't even factor in stamp duty or solicitors' fees, or they don't really even factor in what the rent needs to be for the mortgage lender. So the mortgage lender is going to be looking at that saying, right, your mortgage is going to cost you £500 a month. The rental cover will need to be at least 125% of that. But they don't even look at that. They might say, oh, well, the mortgage is going to be about £500 a month and the rent will be 600. So that's fine. Well, maybe not. So you have to go through a fairly strict exercise of saying, okay, I know what the mortgage is. I know what the rent's going to be. How much am I going to factor in for maintenance? I'm going to pay a letting agent to manage this because I don't want to do it myself. I don't manage my properties myself because it's something I recognize that I'm bad at. So, you have to put all these numbers in and get a real picture. And it kind of, I've got another one here. So let me see. It kind of leads into another one. I forgot what number I'm on now, but it doesn't matter. Oh yeah, so I'm going to jump one now and say, this is sort of part of the same one. Maybe this is 4.5. I'm not sure. So, and this is underestimating the cost and time of a refurb. So it might be a separate one because you may not be refurbishing properties, but it's kind of linked, because when you're doing your deal assessment, you absolutely need to know roughly how much this is going to cost you. And I say roughly because it's not an exact science, and when you're doing the work on a property, other things come to light. So you might need to do a little bit more work than you thought. So build in a contingency for that as well. So yeah, I think not crunching the numbers, probably everybody is a bit guilty. And the other thing everyone does is get a little bit optimistic, saying, well, when I've done this place, it might be worth 150,000. Well, that's 150,000, that's nearly 160,000. So I'll put 160,000, and well, it might look a little bit nicer than the neighboring one. So that's 170. And, before you know it, you've talked yourself into this property being worth 200,000. And if you really, really thought of, were honest with yourself, it was never going to be worth 200,000. So I would say just be very, very careful at that stage.
Yeah, there are a few parts to the due diligence sort of spreadsheet, if you like. And just to kind of touch on, you've got the acquisition costs, of the purchase costs and stamp duty and the legals, etc. And then, as you said, you've got the refurb costs. Once you've done the refurb, then you have got the management costs if you're keeping it to hold. So understanding what those are you going to pay for a gardener? Is it, are the bills all inclusive? And if so, have you included the cleaner as well, and the gardener, and the internet, all of these other things? And then if you're selling it, the GDV at the end, and all of these numbers, I think it's one of the most common questions we get asked is, how do you know? How do you know? Like you said there, it's an art more than a science. It's estimates. You can't be precise. And you've said, not to be too optimistic, but there is a lot involved, and for people starting out, it can be a bit overwhelming, and certainly to put together a spreadsheet on how to do it. I think, do you have any advice for people who are starting out on due diligence?
I would urge getting to know other people who invest in the areas that you invest in, and are actively doing so now. It's absolutely no use talking to someone who bought 20 properties 40 years ago, or
True.
inherited a load of properties. They might be able to help you out with the management side of things, but I would spend time getting to know other investors in the area that you want to operate in, and pick their brains, buy them a coffee, buy them lunch, try and find out as much as you possibly can. That would be probably my number one tip on that. And, spend a lot of time with estate agents as well.
Yeah,
I
think you're right. People who are in the market now, they are active, they are buying and selling and managing right now is the key. And obviously in the magazine, we've got lots of case studies where people have just shared really honestly all of their numbers and how they do the due diligence as well. So it's worth checking out. Okay, next one.
Yeah, I was just linking back to the magazine. It was definitely one of the reasons we started the magazine, is I was unbelievably nosy about how other people made money in property, and I didn't want to make mistakes. So that was kind of key, and still is when we do the interviews at the moment. I want to know exactly. I'll ask all the questions that anybody at a dinner party would be afraid to ask, I guess. So.
Absolutely. I've just been on an interview about an hour ago, and I said to her, she was a lady who was raising private finance, and I was like, what rate did you give them? Like, these are the things that nobody dares asks, but that's the whole point, right? Because we want everybody to learn and just gain knowledge, and not to say that any one person is right, just to, the more you can get a feel for what other people are doing, the more you can make better decisions.
Okay, so it's really interesting you said that one just then, because my next mistake that people make is lending money or investing money into other people's projects. Now, when you're starting out and you've got limited funds, you probably will work with private investors. They might be friends or family, they might be people that you sort of meet in the community, and they'll get involved and help finance your deals. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. It can be a real win-win all round. I think we've seen horror stories, haven't we, of people borrowing millions upon millions of money, probably with no intention of ever paying it back. And I think it probably goes really badly wrong when people are investing in something that they don't know, with someone that they has painted a very good picture of themselves. They've got no security. And if you did sit down and sort of say to that person just before they wrote the check or transferred the money, the funds in, how protected are you if this doesn't work out? What's the downside to this? I don't think they'd have any answer. They get swept up in it, in the excitement of being part of a deal, and maybe an element of wanting to make money, wanting to make a return on their money as well. But I've definitely seen this go wrong, where people put money into a project with someone that they don't really know, and I mean really know, and a project they don't understand. So this is a crazy example of this. Yeah. So years ago, I was at an event, and a guy I knew a bit came up to me and said, "Ant, do you know anyone that would invest £1 million into a project?" And I sort of said, well, maybe I do. And he went, well, here's the thing though, they're not really allowed to know what it's for. I was like, no, I don't know anybody like that. I definitely don't know anybody like that. So again, an extreme example, but sadly, the property world is littered with people who've lost money by investing in projects which they had no control over. They didn't really understand. They didn't really look at the downsides. I mean, the best projects can go wrong, without a doubt. COVID can happen, a black swan event like that, or the banks pull in the funding. Things can and do go wrong, which are completely out of our control. I think those are the rarity, those ones really. Mostly it's because people have invested in something which they're not protected in. So what do you think about that one?
Yeah, so I guess this is for people who they've got a pot of money, they're not sure what to do with it. They might have inherited, they might have saved it, they might have, released equity or whatever. And they don't have the time to learn everything they can about property and go out and do all these creative deals, adding value and all sorts. They would just rather invest in someone else's property, let them all do all the work, and they just take a good return from it. So for those people, it just comes back to another form of due diligence, doesn't it? So how do they ensure that their money is protected as much as possible? How much risk is involved in the deal, in the who they're dealing with, etc. And how is actually the arrangement being structured? So have they gone through solicitors? Is it all in watertight contracts? Do they have security on the property or not? So these are questions that I think are really important for anyone who's got some money to be thinking about. Just kind of get those questions together about, how do I know my money is safe? How much do I trust this person? How much do I think this is a good deal? And start kind of getting those together so that when you do meet somebody, if that's what you want to do, you want to work with other people, then you are prepared and you have the questions ready for them to answer.
Okay, brilliant advice, and much better put than I did. So okay, so the next mistake, and I reckon I see this all the time, it is running out of money. So typically what happens is someone either inherits some money or they save some money. They're in a well-paid job or business and they save up some money, and it takes a long time to do it. And then they buy 1, 2, or 3 properties, or whatever it is, probably using that money as deposits and mortgaging the rest, so they're leveraged. And then they get to sort of property 3 or 4, whatever it might be, and they've run out of money. And I think that's probably the most common thing. I mean, hundreds of people who do that. And the trick they're missing, the bit that they're missing, is adding value to the property that you're buying. And you might think, okay, well, that's a refurb or a development or whatever it might be, or converting the attic, physical work on the property, which often it is. But sometimes it's other things as well. It might be a legal issue. So I remember buying a flat years ago that it was a repossession, so it was a bit of a wreck, and all of the other leaseholders had a bit of a falling out, so they had stopped contributing towards the monthly service charge, and therefore they'd stopped insuring the building, and therefore that property was completely unmortgageable. So at that time, I said, well, that's fine. I can't pay that for a bit. And then I'll work to get everybody back on board, which I did. And then everyone started contributing again. And at the same time, I refurbed the property. And, by fixing the legal issue, it was immediately a mortgageable property. And so increased by 10% in value that day. So sometimes it's physically doing something to the property. Sometimes it's fixing a legal issue. Quite often it's both of those things. Or it might be adding a bedroom to turning a 1-bedroom flat to a 2-bedroom flat. I've done that quite a few times. And buying keenly, buying as cheap as you can. That doesn't necessarily mean below market value, because you might have to pay the asking price, but buying it as cheap as you can and forcing the appreciation of the asset, adding as much value as you can, so you can refinance and take out some or all of your initial investment. So I think we use the term sort of buy, refurb, refinance, don't we, quite often? But it might also mean that every third property that you do, you sell to bring cash back into the business. So property is capital intensive. without a doubt, and cash is the lifeblood of a property business. So your job is to make sure that you don't run out of it.
Yeah, I think that's so important when you're doing any sort of refurbishment. I mean, if you're just buying let's say you're just buying a single let, it's already tenanted, it's ticking over. Do you need to have some money available if the boiler goes, if the roof goes? Like you have to weigh up how likely that's going to happen, how likely that is going to be, and the cost. And do you, you don't necessarily need the cash in the bank. If you need to put a boiler on your credit card or something, then fine, okay, you need to do that, but you need to be able to have access to funds if things do go wrong, for sure. But if you're talking about a refurbishment, a development project, that's a whole other world. And I think, we've seen many people who just go bust halfway through a project because they just run out of funds. It always takes too long, it costs twice as much, and they are just stuck. And they, then the minute they stop paying contractors, the contractors go off site, and then you've got a project that's half done. So really, again, it comes back to due diligence, about understanding your numbers on something like refurbishment or development, where you've got accurate build costs, or you've got a fixed price quote or whatever it is, so that you know how much you need to budget for. And then even then you've got your contingency. Perhaps you've got investors lined up in the background to say, okay, would you come in on this deal if something, if I need extra funds to keep it going? But also there's mistakes that people make. Really simple one, like if they are getting bridging finance on a project and they think, oh, too optimistic again, this is going to be done in 6 to 9 months. Actually, it takes 12 months or 18 months. The fact that they've gone over, they're incurring huge fees that are just completely unnecessary. So always be erring on the side of being conservative, doing your due diligence.
However, and this kind of leads me on to the next one, really, that I think if you are waiting for the perfect deal to come along and tick every single box and to make sure there is 100% no margin for error in any of it, you're probably never going to do a deal, unfortunately. There is a degree of accepting risk and accepting that some things will be out of your control, and rolling with that. Because if you want all of the stars to align and everything to be absolutely perfect, someone else has bought that deal way before you've made the decision, probably. So this is my final one, really. I think sometimes people procrastinate too long. That you have to have a certain element of gut feeling that, yes, I can make this work, or, I've crunched numbers to the best of my ability. There are some things that I can't factor in here, and that's okay. As property investors, we are not about eliminating risk entirely. We're about mitigating it as best as possible. So, and then my final one, which is not a major one really, but can be sort of mentally, I think, in the mind, is people listen to the wrong people. So if none of your friends are property investors and none of your family have ever bought a house that other than the one that they live in, and they've worked in sort of conservative jobs for all of their lives and they're not risk takers, they are going to think you are crazy and be worried about you. And that worry probably comes from a place of love. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's bitter envy that you're doing something to get ahead. But either way, you kind of have to shut that out and go with what you believe is the right thing to do. That you're forging your own path. You're doing this for the sort of financial security of yourself and your family, your loved ones, or because you don't want to work the 9-to-5 grind and you want a little bit more freedom, time and flexibility, which is, we're very fortunate that are able to enjoy that, you and I, Michelle. But I don't know if you've seen this or not, that people, they can give up. They can give up because it's hard. It's really hard to find your first deal, and you've got someone in the background going, "Well, I told you it was a waste of time," and you think, "Oh, thanks for the support." But it is easy to listen to those outside voices, and probably an internal one as well, that is expressing a bit of self-doubt and saying, well, maybe you're not cut out for this. I mean, honestly, if I can go out and buy quite a few different properties and develop them for profit, I won't say everybody can, but certainly most people can. I think some people, it's not them. And we need to accept that as well. So I don't know if that rings true for you as well.
Of course, yeah, I've had people in my life who've, I call them the people who go, "Ooh, that's risky, isn't it?" And they do that through their teeth. Actually, no, the property isn't risky. Like a person takes risks, and it's up to that person to decide how much risk is involved and how much research to do, etc. So I think it's so important to stand guard at the door of your mind and not listen to people who don't have the results that you want to achieve. You need to be surrounding yourself with like-minded people who are on the same journey, who have the results that you want, and whether that is through reading about them in the magazine, getting mentors, getting educated, finding information on YouTube or wherever it is, but being really careful about who you listen to. Again, do your due diligence on those people. If they're just some bloke down the pub or in the gym and they're just saying what they did,
and everyone's an expert in property, aren't they? Everybody. Yes. I mean, there's that old adage, isn't there, that you are the average of the 5 people that you spend most time with, and there's definitely an element of truth in that. And I think of it more of what is the norm behavior of the people that you are hanging out with. So if you're frequently mixing with people who are entrepreneurial, or they're taking on development projects, or they're buying properties, that will seem normal to you because it is the norm. If nobody you hang around with ever does that, it's gonna feel weird, isn't it? I know a few years ago I was taking on a couple of development projects, and much bigger things than I'd ever done before, and I had quite a lot of doubt in there. But one of the people that I knew through networking, actually through the magazine, and he's a mutual friend of ours, had done a similar deal, and we knew each other a little bit. We got to know each other better, and I subsequently raised £2 million in development funding from working with him. Because he'd done it before. It was normal for him. So I think it couldn't be more important to absorb this all the time. Everything that you read and online or in the pages of the magazine, kind of take on board and say, well, how does that, how can I use this to my advantage in my own property business? How can I adapt it? So I think that's really important. I think if you want to buy 100 houses, hang out with some people who've bought 100 houses. Don't hang out with the guy who's bought one. So,
absolutely, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. It's there's a phrase from Tony Robbins who says, "Proximity is power." Proximity is power, and it's just like you said there. You hang around with certain people, and things happen. Hang around with other people, other things do or don't happen. And it doesn't mean you need to, get divorced and get rid of your friends at all. I've still got, really good friends that I've known my whole life. I just don't talk to them about property. I might say, oh yeah, this is what I'm up to. But I would never dream of asking for their advice. Why would I do that? So it's just best to talk about other things.
Do you hate that when you read online saying, if your friends or family are not into this, you need to sack them, you need to get rid of them? It's like, no, you don't. Some of these are your lifelong friends. You've known them for 30 years. You don't need to get rid of them. You just need to supplement them with other friends who are kind of into
I have
this,
friends that you go to the gym with, and you have friends that you go for a drink with, and friends that you go on holiday with, whatever it is, old school friends. But yeah, you just decide what you talk to about certain things with who. And
okay, so this was just our sort of starter list of mistakes to avoid when getting started in property investing. I hope they're useful. I have made some of those mistakes myself along the way. I've definitely seen a lot of people make all of them. I don't think I've seen one person who's made every single one of those mistakes, but that person is probably out there. So, but I would actively encourage reading YPN magazine. We have the YPN podcast that you should listen to as well. There are loads of other great property podcasts and resources out there and online forums. Absorb as much as you possibly can. Take it all with a pinch of salt, because there's a few people out there who are perhaps don't have your best interests at heart. It was actually the reason we started the magazine in the first place, that for a few pounds a month, someone can learn a lot about property investing for without breaking the bank, should we say.
Absolutely. And it becomes a community of people that you can reach out to and you can connect with. If you see somebody in the magazine, then you can just go and connect with them through socials and meet them in real life and say, okay, well, I see what you're doing. This looks great. Tell me more. And then, it's a great starting point to, as you say, building that community and working with like-minded people.
Okay. So I hope you've enjoyed watching the video. Don't make those property mistakes. Don't do it. Maybe we look forward to telling your property success story, profiling one of your projects in a future edition of YPN.
Great. Thank you so much, Ant. It's been really useful. And for everyone watching, you don't know what you don't know, but now you do know. So just bear all these things in mind. It is a long-term game. This is not get rich quick overnight. No one's saying that. This is about just growing your portfolio, getting started and doing things in the best way possible. Really important to set yourself up for success from the beginning. We look forward to seeing you in the next video coming up soon.